The silence that falls over the snow-dusted Ardennes forest is not one of peace, but of anticipation. It is a heavy, brittle quiet, broken only by the sigh of the wind through the pine boughs and the faint, almost imperceptible crunch of frost under a nervous man's boot. It is December 16th, 1944. For the men of the 99th Infantry Division, huddled in their foxholes along a quiet sector of the front known as the Ghost Front, this is to be another day of watchful waiting. But they are wrong. Deep within the frozen German woods, a storm is gathering, a colossal, final gamble by a desperate Third Reich. Over 200,000 German soldiers and hundreds of panzers are poised to strike, their objective audacious: to split the Allied armies in two, to capture the port of Antwerp, and to turn the tide of the war. And in their path stands a single, green American division, and a handful of men at a crossroads soon to be known by a different name, a name that would become a legend: Lanzerath. And at the heart of the coming storm is a man who should not have been there, a man whose war was supposed to be fought with spatulas and pots, not with a machine gun. His name is Private First Class Leonard Lomell, but to the men of his company, he's just the cook. How does a man who serves hot chow become the last line of defense for an entire regiment? How does he find the courage to stare into the face of an overwhelming enemy, an enemy so vast it seems like the forest itself has come to life with malevolent intent? The dawn is about to break, not with light, but with the thunder of 1,000 guns, and one man, armed with little more than sheer will, is about to step into the path. The first sound is not a sound, but a vibration, a faint trembling in the earth that travels up through the soles of cold boots. Then comes the distant rolling thunder, a deep-throated roar that seems to emanate from every point on the compass at once. The German artillery barrage, Hitler's last great sledgehammer, has begun. The world dissolves into noise and fire. Trees, ancient and towering, are snapped like matchsticks. Geysers of frozen earth and shrapnel erupt across the American positions. Men huddle at the bottom of their holes, hands clamped over their ears, praying for the storm to pass. For Leonard Lomell, crouched in the relative safety of the company command post, a sturdy Belgian farmhouse, the chaos is a world away from the rhythmic, predictable world of his field kitchen. The air is thick with the smell of cordite and fear. This is not the war he trained for. His war was about morale, about a hot meal on a cold day, about a taste of home in a foreign land. But as the shelling lifts with an abrupt, ear-ringing silence, a new sound takes its place. A sound that chills the blood more than any winter wind. The metallic clanking of tank treads and the guttural shouts of German infantry. They are coming. And they are not just a probing force. Through the shattered windows, Lomell sees them, a gray-green tide, hundreds of them, emerging from the tree line with disciplined, terrifying purpose. The 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division, elite German paratroopers, are swarming towards Lanzerath. The handful of American infantrymen in the forward outposts open up with rifles and a single machine gun, their fire desperate staccato. But it is a pebble against a tsunami. The German advance barely slows. Orders are shouted, confused, panicked. The command post is in chaos. They are being overrun. And in that moment of supreme crisis, Leonard Lomell's war changes. He sees a .30 caliber machine gun abandoned near a window, its belt of ammunition snaking across the floor. The cook looks at the weapon, then at the advancing enemy, and makes a decision that will defy all logic, a decision that will etch his name into history. He reaches for the gun, his hands, more accustomed to dough than death, closing around the cold, hard steel. The weight of the .30 caliber is unfamiliar, alien in Leonard Lomell's grasp. These are hands that knead dough, that stir steaming vats of stew, that carefully measure out coffee grounds for 100 tired men. They are not the hands of a machine gunner. Yet, as his fingers find the pistol grip and the trigger, a strange calm settles over him. The cacophony of battle, the screams, the rifle cracks, the guttural German commands, seems to fade into a dull roar, a tunnel of sound focused solely on the killing ground before him. The German paratroopers are advancing in textbook skirmish lines, confident, almost casual in their movements. They have shattered the American forward positions with ease. They believe the village is theirs for the taking. They do not see the lone figure in the farmhouse window. Lomell takes a deep breath, the air tasting of dust and burnt powder. He thumbs the safety off. The metal is ice cold against his cheek. He sights down the barrel, picking a target, a group of 3 paratroopers moving tactically from one piece of cover to another. Can one man, a cook, truly stem this gray-green tide? Can courage alone outweigh the crushing mathematics of war? He exhales slowly and squeezes the trigger. The gun barks to life, a deafening, ripping sound that shatters the relative quiet of the farmhouse. The first burst is short, controlled. It stitches a line of dirt fountains across the snow, just behind the Germans. They drop, scrambling for cover, their confidence momentarily shaken. Lomell adjusts his aim. The next burst is longer, more lethal. He walks the fire into a ditch where several paratroopers have taken shelter. The sound is horrific, a mechanical tearing of cloth and flesh. The German advance towards this sector grinds to a sudden, confused halt. They are pinned down. From their perspective, they are facing a determined, well-positioned machine gun nest. They have no way of knowing it is a single man, a cook, defending a command post on the verge of collapse. Lomell's mind is racing, no longer that of a soldier, but of a craftsman. He is no longer making a meal, he is managing a defense. He fires in short, brutal bursts, conserving his precious ammunition, shifting his aim from one threat to another, making the Germans believe they are facing a much larger force. He ignores the spent shell casings piling up at his feet, the heat beginning to radiate from the gun's barrel. He ignores the zip and crack of return fire now peppering the farmhouse walls. A bullet smashes through the window frame, sending a shower of splinters across his face. He flinches, but does not stop. He cannot stop. He is the dam, and the flood is at the gate. The German commander, frustrated by this unexpected resistance, barks new orders. A squad begins to maneuver, trying to outflank the farmhouse to get a clear shot at this stubborn American position. Lomell sees the movement from the corner of his eye. He swings the heavy gun, the barrel smoking hot, and unleashes a torrent of fire, forcing the flanking team to dive for cover behind a low stone wall. But he is one man. He can only be in one place at a time. And as he focuses on the threat to his left, a new, more terrifying sound reaches his ears from the right, the grinding, squealing clatter of heavy armor. A German Mark IV Panzer, its long gun sniffing the air like a predator, lumbers out of the tree line and turns its formidable bulk towards the farmhouse. The Panzer is a monolithic beast, a moving mountain of steel and malevolence. Its tracks churn the frozen Belgian earth into mud, its exhaust belching black smoke into the crisp winter air. The very ground seems to tremble in its presence. To the pinned-down German paratroopers, it is a savior. To Leonard Lomell, it is death incarnate. The machine gun in his hands, which moments before felt like a tool of immense power, is now suddenly terrifyingly useless. He could fire 1,000 rounds at that armored hull and achieve nothing but sparks and noise. The tank's commander, a small figure in a black uniform, is visible in the cupola, scanning the battlefield. His gaze sweeps over the house farm, pauses on the window from which Lomell's fire has been emanating, and then he points. The long 75mm gun begins to depress, to level itself directly at Lomell's position. Time seems to stretch, to become a thick, syrupy substance. Lomell can see the individual bolts on the tank's turret, the mud caked on its bogey wheels. This is it. This is the end. A direct hit from that gun will turn the farmhouse and everyone in it into splinters and dust. His mind flashes to his kitchen, to the warmth of the stove, to the faces of the men he feeds. The absurdity of it all is overwhelming. To survive the artillery, to hold off an entire company of elite infantry, only to be vaporized by a tank. But then his training, buried deep beneath his cook's duties, surfaces. Tanks have blind spots. The thought is clear, desperate. The main gun cannot hit what is too close. With a surge of adrenaline that burns through the fear, Lomell abandons the machine gun. He grabs a box of ammo and then another and scrambles away from the window, deeper into the shadowy interior of the farmhouse. He needs a new position, a position where the tank cannot bring its main gun to bear. He stumbles into a back room, a pantry that smells faintly of onions and old wood. There is a small, high window overlooking the side of the house. It's not much, but it's something. From here, he can see the flank of the advancing German infantry, who are now emboldened, starting to rise from their cover, believing the tank has solved their problem. The Panzer grinds closer, now only 50 yards away. The gun is still aimed at the empty window where Lomell once was. The commander shouts an order. The tank lurches to a halt, preparing to fire. Lomell heaves the heavy machine gun onto a sack of potatoes, using it as a makeshift rest. He has one chance. He cannot kill the tank, but he can blind it. He sights on the commander in the cupola. He takes a breath, holds it, and fires. The burst is a shriek of defiance. Tracers whip past the tank commander's head. He ducks, startled, disappearing inside the safety of his steel cocoon. The tank's machine gun, coaxial to the main gun, opens up, hosing down the front of the farmhouse with a storm of fire, but Lomell is no longer there. He has bought himself minutes, maybe only seconds. The Panzer is blind, but it is not harmless. It begins to creep forward again, its driver guided by shouted commands from within, its intent clear, to crush the farmhouse under its tracks. Lomell switches his fire back to the infantry, forcing them to keep their heads down, isolating the tank from its supporting foot soldiers. It is a deadly game of cat and mouse, with the entire structure shaking from the impact of machine gun rounds and the terrifying proximity of the armored behemoth. He is running low on ammunition. His arms ache from the punishing recoil of the gun. His world has shrunk to this single room, the smell of gunpowder and the ever-present, deafening roar. And then, through the chaos, a new sound. The sharp, distinctive crack of an American M1 Garand from a nearby building. Then another, and another. A handful of his comrades, inspired by his stand, have rallied and are adding their fire to the fray. A flicker of hope, small but fierce, ignites within him. But hope is a dangerous thing on a battlefield. It makes you believe you might live. And as he risks a glance out the shattered window, he sees the German response. The paratroopers, enraged by this prolonged resistance, are preparing for a final, all-out assault. They are fixing bayonets. The metallic schnick of bayonets being locked onto rifle lugs is a sound that carries a primal terror, a promise of close-quarters butchery that transcends the impersonal nature of gunfire. The German paratroopers, frustrated and enraged by the dogged resistance from a handful of Americans, are done with maneuver. They are going to charge. They are going to overwhelm this position with sheer, brutal force. Leonard Lomell watches them form up, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The Panzer, its commander still wary of sticking his head out, continues to pour machine gun fire into the farmhouse, keeping the other American defenders pinned. But the main threat is now the 24 infantrymen gathering for the final push. Lomell's machine gun is his only answer. He traverses the barrel, his movements now fluid, instinctive. The cook is gone. The machine gunner is all that remains. He waits. He lets them come. He lets them get within 30 yards, close enough to see the determined, hardened faces beneath their helmets. Then he opens fire. The .30 caliber becomes an instrument of pure, terrifying efficiency. He fires in long, scything bursts, cutting down the first wave in a tangle of limbs and screams. The charge falters, the men throwing themselves to the ground. But their officers are screaming, driving them forward. They get up and come again. Lomell's world narrows to the rhythm of death. The deafening roar of the gun, the hot brass showering around him, the acrid smell of burnt powder searing his lungs, the relentless advance of the enemy. He is a machine himself now, a part of the weapon he commands. He feels a searing pain in his leg. A piece of shrapnel or a stray round, he doesn't know. He doesn't care. The adrenaline is a fire in his veins, numbing the pain, fueling his impossible stand. He is running dangerously low on ammunition. He has maybe one belt left. The other American rifles have fallen silent, either out of ammo or because their holders are dead or wounded. He is alone again. The Germans sense it. They rise once more, a final, desperate lunge. Lomell fires his last long burst, and the gun falls silent, its barrel smoking, its mechanism empty. He fumbles for another belt, but his hands find only empty boxes. This is it, the end of the line. He draws his .45 caliber pistol, a pitiful weapon against a bayonet charge. He braces himself against the wall, ready to sell his life as dearly as he can. But the charge does not come. The Germans, bloodied and cautious, have halted again, regrouping behind whatever cover they can find. They have been mauled by this unseen defender, and they are no longer willing to rush headlong into what they believe is a fortified strongpoint. The battle descends into a tense, bloody stalemate. The tank continues to fire, but without infantry to support it, it cannot safely advance to point-blank range. The paratroopers exchange sporadic fire with the few remaining Americans, but the main assault on the farmhouse has broken against Lomell's will. For nearly 4 hours, a single cook has held a key crossroads against a battalion of elite German troops. He has killed or wounded dozens, disrupted their timetable, and sown chaos and confusion in their ranks. But the war is bigger than one man's heroism. The sounds of battle are intensifying elsewhere. The entire Ghost Front is erupting. The 99th Division is being pushed back, encircled. Orders, fragmented and desperate, finally reach what's left of the command post. Retreat. Fall back to new defensive lines. The impossible stand is over. The time to survive has begun. Lomell, wounded and exhausted, helps a few other survivors out of the shattered farmhouse. They slip out the back, into the concealing woods, leaving the silent, smoking machine gun behind. They have done the impossible, but they have lost the position. As they disappear into the trees, Lomell takes one last look back at the crossroads. The Germans are finally moving in, swarming over the ground he had so tenaciously defended. They secure the village, but their precious momentum, the very essence of the blitzkrieg, has been bled away by one man's courage. Yet, for Lomell and his comrades, the ordeal is far from over. They are now behind enemy lines, in a forest crawling with victorious German soldiers, with miles of frozen, hostile territory between them and safety. And as the gray shadows of the Ardennes close in around them, a new sound begins to echo through the trees, the barking of German shepherds. The hunt has begun. The cold of the Ardennes is a living entity, a predator that sinks its teeth deep into bone. For Leonard Lomell and the handful of survivors from Lanzarote, it is a constant, grinding agony. Every breath is a knife in the lungs. The snow, once a picturesque blanket, is now a treacherous, energy-sapping obstacle, clinging to their boots, soaking their trousers, betraying their every footstep with a fresh trail for their pursuers. They move in a single file, a ghostly procession of exhausted, haunted men. Lomell's leg throbs with a hot, persistent pain, a stark reminder of the battle he has just left behind. The adrenaline has faded, leaving him hollowed out, trembling with a fatigue so profound it feels like a physical weight. But he cannot stop. The barking of the dogs is their relentless soundtrack, sometimes distant, sometimes terrifyingly close. The Germans are not letting them go. They are hunting down every straggler, every piece of the division they shattered. The men move with a desperate silence, their eyes wide, their ears straining for any sound that isn't the wind or the dogs. Every snapped twig is a potential enemy. Every shadow in the dense pine forest could conceal a German patrol. How far can a man push himself when every muscle screams for rest? How does a soldier find the strength to take another step when hope is a fading ember in a vast frozen darkness? They navigate by the sun, a pale, weak disk hidden behind a blanket of gray cloud. Their goal is to reach the town of Elsenborn, where rumor has it a new defensive line is being formed. It might as well be 100 miles away. They are lost, disoriented, and running out of time. Suddenly, a raised hand from the point man brings the ragged column to a halt. They freeze, melting into the trees. Ahead, through a clearing, they see a column of German infantry marching along a forest road. Not a scattered patrol, but a full company, well-equipped, moving with purpose towards the front. The Americans watch, barely daring to breathe, as the gray-green river of men flows past. They are behind the spearhead of the entire German offensive. The scale of their predicament crashes down upon them. They are not just evading a single patrol, they are adrift in an ocean of enemy soldiers. Once the column has passed, they push on, faster now, driven by a fresh spike of fear. The landscape begins to change, the dense forest giving way to more open, rolling fields. It's more exposed, more dangerous, but it offers a clearer view of their direction. As dusk begins to bleed the light from the sky, painting the snow in hues of blue and violet, they crest a small ridge. And there, in the valley below, they see it. A sight that makes their blood run colder than the Arctic air. Not Elsenborn, not safety, but a sprawling German motor pool, a temporary logistical hub filled with trucks, half-tracks, and staff cars. Hundreds of enemy soldiers are milling about, refueling, repairing vehicles, the sounds of their chatter and machinery carrying clearly on the still evening air. They have stumbled directly into the belly of the beast. There is no way around it. To the left, a wide, exposed field. To the right, a steep, impassable ravine. Their path to survival lies directly through the heart of the enemy camp. They are trapped, with the hounds at their back and the wolf's den before them. One of the men turns to Lomell, his face a mask of despair, and whispers the question they are all thinking. What do we do now, Cook? A desperate, insane plan begins to form in Lomell's mind. It is not the plan of a trained infantryman, but of a man who understands chaos, who has just spent hours creating it. He looks at the German camp below, not as an impenetrable fortress, but as a system with a rhythm, with patterns, with vulnerabilities. He notices the sentries are mostly focused on the perimeter, looking outward. The men inside the camp feel secure, their vigilance lowered. They are thinking about hot food, about warmth, about the next leg of their advance. They are not expecting a handful of desperate Americans to be hiding on the ridge above them. "We don't go around," Lomell whispers, his voice hoarse. "We go through." The other men stare at him as if he's lost his mind. But Lomell is already assessing the terrain, the patterns of the sentries, the layout of the vehicles. He points to a cluster of fuel trucks parked near the center of the temporary depot. "That's the key," he says. "We create a diversion, a big one." They have very little between them, a few rifles, a couple of grenades, and Lomell's .45 pistol. It seems like a pitiful arsenal to take on an entire battalion. But they have one weapon that Germans don't, the absolute certainty that they are already dead if they don't try. They wait for full darkness, the cold seeping into their very souls. The temperature plummets. The stars are sharp, icy points in a black velvet sky. The camp below settles into a routine, with pockets of light from lanterns and vehicle headlights creating pools of illumination in the darkness. This is their only chance. They will slip down the ridge, use the shadows between the vehicles for cover, get as close to the fuel trucks as possible, and then unleash hell. They check their weapons one last time. The plan is sheer madness, a suicide mission. But what other choice do they have? To wait for dawn and be captured or shot? To freeze to death on this ridge? No. They will go down fighting, just as Lomell did in the farmhouse. They will take as many of the enemy with them as they can. They start their descent, moving like wraiths, each footstep placed with agonizing care. The snow muffles their sound, but it also reflects the faint light, making them feel terrifyingly exposed. They can hear the Germans now, laughing, talking, the clink of mess tins. The smell of German tobacco and cooking food wafts up to them, a cruel mockery of the hunger gnawing at their own stomachs. Lomell leads the way, his injured leg screaming in protest with every step. They reach the perimeter, slithering under a parked truck, then darting to the shadow of a half-track. They are inside. The camp is alive around them. They are ghosts in the machine, moving from one island of darkness to the next, their hearts pounding so loudly they are sure it must give them away. They are 30 yards from the fuel trucks, then 20, so close. Lomell signals for the men to get their grenades ready. This is it. One big bang, and then a fighting retreat back into the darkness. But just as he is about to give the signal, a door on a nearby command truck swings open, flooding the area with light. A German officer steps out, lighting a cigarette. He turns, and his eyes, accustomed to the darkness, lock directly on to the shadowy forms of the American soldiers frozen in place just yards from his precious fuel supply. For a long, heart-stopping second, nobody moves. The German officer's cigarette hangs suspended on his lip, his hand still cupped around the lighter's flame, his brain struggling to process the impossible sight before him. His mouth begins to open, to form a shout of alarm. The world seems to freeze in that single, incandescent moment. The German officer's eyes are wide with disbelief, the unspoken shout caught in his throat. Leonard Lomell doesn't think, he acts. His .45 is in his hand, a blur of motion in the half-light. The pistol barks, a sharp, shocking sound that rips through the mundane noises of the camp. The officer is thrown back against the truck with a grunt, the cigarette spinning from his lips like a dying firefly. The silence that follows is even more deafening than the shot. It lasts for a single, suspended heartbeat. And then the camp erupts. Shouts of alarm in German, the scramble for weapons. The chaos is immediate and total. It is the very thing Lomell was counting on. "Now!" he screams to his men. In unison, they pull the pins on their grenades, lobbing them not at individual soldiers, but in a high arc towards the cluster of fuel trucks. The following moments are a study in controlled pandemonium. The grenades sail through the air, their fuses hissing unseen. Lomell and his men are already moving, firing their rifles from the hip as they sprint back the way they came. Not aiming to kill, but to sow more confusion, to make the Germans believe they are under a full-scale attack. They don't wait to see the result of their throw. They run. They dive behind a stack of crates just as the world behind them turns to fire. The grenades detonate. 1, 2, then a third, and this one finds its mark. A secondary explosion, a deep whoomph that sucks the air from their lungs as one of the fuel trucks ignites. A fireball roars into the night sky, turning darkness into hellish flickering day. The concussion wave slams into them, a physical blow. Shrapnel and burning debris rain down on the camp. The screams now are not of alarm, but of terror and agony. The diversion is more successful than they could have ever dreamed. The entire German logistical hub is in an uproar. Vehicles are burning, men are running in every direction, some to fight the fire, others to find the attackers, their commands lost in the inferno. In the glorious, terrifying chaos, Lomell's small band has a chance. They break from cover, no longer trying to be stealthy, just running for their lives, putting as much distance between themselves and the burning camp as possible. They scramble back up the ridge, expecting at any moment to feel the searing impact of a bullet in their backs. But the Germans are too busy dealing with the cataclysm in their midst. The Americans reach the tree line at the top of the ridge and plunge into the welcoming darkness of the forest, not stopping, driven by a fresh surge of adrenaline. They run until their lungs burn and their legs feel like lead. Only then do they risk a look back. The valley glows an angry orange, a beacon of their desperation and their defiance. They have struck a blow, a real blow, against the enemy that sought to destroy them. They have bought themselves time. But they are not safe. The explosion has lit up the entire countryside, announcing their presence to every German within 10 miles. The hunt will now intensify. They are wounded, exhausted, and have just declared war on an entire German battalion. They push deeper into the forest, the image of the burning fuel truck seared into their memories. It is a small victory in a vast losing battle, but it is a victory nonetheless. As they move, a new sound begins to filter through the trees, a low, persistent rumble that is not the wind, not dogs, not explosions. It is the sound of engines, dozens of them, growing steadily louder, coming from the direction they hope is friendly lines. But in the Ardennes, in December 1944, nothing is certain. Have they just run towards their salvation, or directly into the path of the next German panzer column? The rumble grows from a vibration in the ground to a deafening chorus of straining engines, clanking tracks, and shouting men. Lomell and his ragged band hit the dirt, pressing themselves into the frozen leaf litter beneath a thick stand of pines. Their hearts, which had just begun to slow, are once again hammering against their ribs. Is this it? After everything, the stand at the crossroads, the harrowing escape, the destruction of the fuel depot, are they to be cornered and cut down in these anonymous woods? They peer through the branches, their weapons gripped tight, ready to sell their lives dearly one last time. And then they see them. Not the menacing gray of German uniforms, but the familiar drab olive green of American fatigues. Not the fearsome silhouette of a panzer, but the hulking, beautiful form of a Sherman tank, its white star clear and bright in the moonlight. It's an American column, part of the 1st Infantry Division, the big red one, moving up to reinforce the crumbling line at Elsenborn. The relief that washes over the men is so powerful it is physical. Some of them weep openly, great heaving sobs that steam in the frigid air. Others simply collapse, their bodies finally giving out now that the immediate threat of death has passed. They stagger out of the woods, their hands in the air, shouting, "Americans! We're Americans!" The lead tank commander, a young lieutenant with a grimy face, looks down at them in astonishment. They are a horrific sight, filthy, bloodied, their uniforms in tatters, their eyes burning with a mixture of trauma and triumph. Lomell, leaning heavily on a comrade, his leg now a mess of clotted blood and torn wool, looks up at the lieutenant. "We're from the 99th, he croaks, "from Lanzerath." The lieutenant's eyes widen. The rumors are already spreading along the front. Tales of a massacre, of a handful of men who held a key crossroads for hours against impossible odds, buying precious time for the divisions to the west to organize. "You're the ones?" the lieutenant asks, his voice full of awe. "They said everyone at Lanzerath was lost." "Not everyone," Lomell says, his voice barely a whisper. They are loaded onto trucks, given blankets and passed canteens of water. As they are driven back to the relative safety of the American lines, Lomell looks out at the columns of fresh-faced GIs moving forward to take their place in the meat grinder. He thinks of the men he left behind in the snow at the crossroads. He thinks of the German soldiers he cut down with his machine gun. He is a cook. He was never supposed to be a hero. The Medal of Honor he would eventually receive would feel less like a reward and more like a testament to the men who didn't make it back. The Battle of the Bulge would rage for another brutal month, the bloodiest battle the United States Army would fight in the entire war. But in those first critical hours, the delay caused by a handful of men at places like Lanzerath was priceless. It allowed Eisenhower and his generals to understand the scale of the offensive. It allowed Patton to wheel his Third Army north. It allowed the 101st Airborne to dig in at Bastogne. The German timetable, meticulously planned, was shattered on the anvil of unexpected, unyielding courage. Leonard Lomell's war was not over. He would recover from his wounds and return to his unit, to his kitchen. But he had already fought his greatest battle. He had stared into the abyss, and with a cook's hands and a warrior's heart, he had held the line. The story of the cook who single-handedly held off 200 enemy soldiers would become legend, a stark reminder that in the crucible of war, heroes are not born. They are forged in fire, in ice, and in the unwavering resolve to do what is necessary when all hope seems lost. And as the truck carrying him jolting along the frozen road, the sounds of the ongoing battle a distant thunder, Leonard Lomell closed his eyes, and for the first time in days, allowed himself to truly rest.